Annunciation of the Lord Parish. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, so it must be time for the pastor's chat. So this is my chance to come online and just spend a little time with you, just kind of talk about some of the things that are going on, some thoughts that might be in my head, and give you a chance to answer questions or maybe make comments. So we've been chatting the last little while, a whole bunch of stuff. Like again, it's just sort of the transition time. We've been going a couple transitions actually, where we just ordained a couple priests on last weekend. So that was Father Kevin and Father Joshua. Now moving on, he just left today for actually yesterday. Today's Wednesday. So yeah, yesterday he actually pulled out and went to Toronto. So again, blessings on Father Josh as he starts his new ministry in Toronto, and then Father Kevin will be coming in. He isn't quite in tonight. I think he comes in tomorrow, and he'll be taking up this weekend. He'll preach for the first time on this weekend, and so that's all kind of part of the transition. So that's happening. That was kind of the last big thing. It was Kevin's ordination, Father Kevin, and then the transformation where Josh kind of moves on and Kevin kind of steps in, and that's good. And now we're really the only last thing I think is the Vacation Bible School, which we'll be just kind of gearing up for. We've started doing props and things and getting that stuff ready. So that's Vacation Bible School, which I think is sold out now. I think we have 90 young people and then another probably 25 or so adults. So that's really good. It's very, very positive. So we're looking forward to that. And so that's where it goes. So what are we talking about tonight? Well, we've been doing this whole thing on gray zones. I think that's what I talked about last week, gray zones and this kind of assumption, I think in the West particularly, since the Second World War, that strife and conflict are bad for business. And that's a lot. It's a very terrible summary or simplification of a much more complicated issue. But again, the source of popularism, if people rise up, and whether it's fascism or communism or whatever, it's bad for business. And so the world got together, or at least the businesses, and we have this now multinationals and transnationals and large banking corporations and holding funds and all these things that are bigger than government in a sense. It's like you have corporations that are bigger than a lot of countries, and they're kind of running things. And this is just going to kind of march forward. And so you see this kind of liberal democracy continue throughout that time. And to be honest, I think we've kind of all enjoyed some of that. I could give that example of last time I went to London, just in early May, where showed my passport to a machine and then walked into Europe. Not even a blink. Used my credit card on a subway. Not a problem. Paid in U.S. dollars and paid in British pounds. Like I was charging U.S. dollars, paying in British pounds. It didn't even blink. Like it just flashed my credit card. Done. Great. Very convenient. And somehow this is all just going to march on. That it's not going to change. Like we're just going to get more secular, probably more technological, and eventually we all end up in a Star Trek episode. Okay, that's old stuff. I talked about that a number of times. Well, what if that's not happening? What if that's just a bit of kind of utopian promise of modernity, that we're just things are going to get brighter and faster and smarter and cleaner? We see in our world, like especially last weekend, it was just bizarre what happened in Russia, kind of connected to the war in Ukraine, and was it a coup? Wasn't it a coup? I remember I caught that just a little bit on Twitter, and again, I'm not a big, huge Twitter guy, and then I remember flicking to the television. Is this real? And it seemed like the TV hadn't quite caught up yet with what was happening, and I don't think we have yet. Like it looked like first a kind of a little bit of a protest, and then maybe sort of a coup or toppling of a government. And just when that seemed imminent, then it all got called off, and it's like, no, that's okay. No harm done. Bizarre. It's bizarre. And this is, and I don't think anybody really knows what the heck that was all about. And maybe somebody somewhere knows more than I do, but just that kind of thing, like that, it sent a shiver, I think, through the Western world. Like what the heck just happened? And that we can watch it on real time on social media. Now, I've not been a proponent of social media. I mean, I'm doing it right now. Like I'm putting out content and I'm making comments. But it's just very, very strange times in which we live. And that's one of a number of things. So just like in any kind of transitional time, like the fall of Rome or the Industrial Revolution or maybe the technological revolution. Those are all things that have happened kind of in history. There's this sort of gray zone in between where you're kind of leaving one reality and starting another, and you're not quite sure. There are parts of you that are still in kind of the old world, which we could watch news and find out what was happening, and a new reality where it's sort of almost independent news, like the role that social media now plays in giving word out almost in real time without a whole lot of filtering. So you can't really figure it out. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Now, where's the church in all of that? You see, this is the thing. Like, we've been kind of on a bit of a downturn. I don't know if anyone would argue that if you compare us to where we were, say, 40 or 50 years ago, there was much higher attendance, and just the church's role, the Catholic Church in particular, in society was Catholic. I think 50% of Canadians profess to be Catholic, and in certain provinces, certainly more. Like Quebec, it was just about everybody, and I think Newfoundland was kind of the same, like at least a large number of certain areas. It was a bit here and there. Newfoundland's a little different. But that certainly has been in decline, and that's no great secret. And I think the Bishop Yvon, when he spoke here a couple of weeks ago, he talked about sort of like a snake bite, and this is an Old Testament. When the Israelites were in the desert and moving towards the Promised Land, they grumbled against God, and so God sent serpents among them, sort of nasty, and they were bit. And you have a choice when you're bit by a snake. You look down at the bite, or you look up at the cure. In that case, it was a snake on a pole, and this sort of notion of we can look down at the problem or up at the solution. We can manage the decline, or we can start to lead to something else, to something new. And this is this notion of growth curves. Like you have, any institution will go through cycles where you have kind of a introduction, kind of advancement or development, and then a sort of a plateauing, and then eventually a decline. And the goal then is, of course, to jump to the next one. Like before you completely run out of steam, you want to kind of jump to the next growth period or the next new idea. And this is in business and government and all sorts of things. And if you think about it, all this innovation often comes in times of crisis. Well, can that apply to the church as well? Well, I think so. It's probably a little different in the sense of what we believe, what our fundamental core value, in a relationship in Christ, and the belief in that Jesus is who he says he is. He does the things he says he can do. That Christ takes our sins onto himself. He dies on a cross and rises again. And in that offering to God the Father, then flows the sacramental grace that the Eucharist, the confessional, baptism, all of the seven sacraments. It all flows from that one kind of sacrificial offering of Christ on the cross. Well, that's not going to change. Like, it's not like we're looking for a new and improved Jesus, as if somehow that's the solution here, with just gluten-free or with some kind of ad campaign. No, the core value stays the same. But how we present it, like what I'm doing right now, like again, if you told me 4 or 5 years ago to go online and just kind of talk about what you're thinking, and people would watch that and actually comment on it and maybe even draw something from it, that would be strange to me. Like, I thought, well, no, this doesn't make sense. But none of that through COVID, really, and then just through personal experience, that's where we find ourselves. Okay, so what does that look like then? If you're going to jump from one curve onto the next curve, where we start to do the growth again, what would be that thing that we're looking for? See, I think there's the motivation to make the jump. There's the wider context of why we're jumping. It's sort of because it's not just the church. I think the entire Western culture is going through this massive shift in question of identity. But what does it look like on the edge of that new curve? Well, I think if there's an expression, I heard this recently too, and this again a little shout out to Rebuilders and Mark Sayer. But the slogan that we're getting from Divine Renovation is moving from a maintenance model, remember, maintaining or just looking at the snake bite, or going to missional, which is this different approach, like looking up to the solution, trying to define what a missional church would actually look like. What does it actually smell like? What does it feel like? How do you do mission in this modern world? But I don't think it changes much from than it ever did. To be missional is to kind of connect to other people, to share the core gospel, to present it in such a way that it's clear and credible. I think that's always a line that I think Catholic Christian Outreach, CCO, uses, to present the gospel in a clear and credible way and save the world one soul at a time. It's a tall order. Like that's a mission statement, and it can be almost a little cliche possibly, but I don't think so. I think they really thought about that, and I think they actually live it pretty well. And I think maybe in some ways they're modeling where we need to go, kind of as a parish and as a diocese. So if I talked about that thing on the next curve that I would really encourage people to really think about it and consider is discipling, or almost the capacity to disciple. Like that's a mouthful. Like, let's unpack that. So when I say a capacity to disciple, what am I talking about? Well, do I have in the parish 15, 20, 30 people who are deep in their own faith, deep enough in their own spirituality, strong enough, like mature enough, you don't have to be perfect, but I mean just to be kind of together enough that they're able to share that life with other people, to the point that those other people would eventually track towards sharing with someone else. Now that sounds almost like a shampoo commercial. Remember that whole, she told two friends and they told two friends and they told two friends, and it just, but as crazy as that sounds, that's not too far from the early church, the apostolic church. We talked about Christendom kind of dying, one of those things that's in a downward curve, when the wider culture supported Judeo-Christian ethic, to an apostolic church which it's almost, these new ideas are coming to a world that had never heard about Christ, had never heard anything about this, doesn't know what you're talking about when you're trying to describe it, which is getting pretty close to where we are now. So then it's the capacity to bring it up at your book club, in your circle of friends, befriend someone that you go to the gym with, to speak openly to those that are around you, in a way to be intentional about sharing the gospel message with other people in a way that's receivable and kind of life-giving and potentially healing, to the point that they would want to share it with others. Now, that it would be a capacity, and I don't think I have 30 or 40 people. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe this is happening in ways, in more subtle ways that we don't, we as Catholics don't, making evangelizing or to share the gospel or to speak in direct terms, we're generally not that keen on that. We kind of do it in more subtle ways, through service or through witness. But I think we may have to have a little chicken line there. We have to be a little bit bolder. And that's, I think, is what's going to look like on that top of that curve. Now, okay, this is an idea. This is a concept. I'm not trying to say, God told me to share this with you. I'm not trying to say this is the role of the church for the next 200 years. But it's not too far off. I think it's where we're going to have to go. Because if we don't make believers, then how are we going to have any believers? Because the world's not going to make them, and I don't know if our current structure is making them, just how we do things, and I think that somehow something's getting missed. People talk about Catholic values and they talk about Catholic issues, but I don't know if they talk about Christ, and that's a problem. Maybe we got to start talking about Christ, and then the other issues and the values will come later. But I thought for the night, so just maybe to think about that. What's your capacity to be and make disciples? And how are we fostering that and developing that in our parish, with leadership, with encouragement? We're talking last night, we're doing some long-term planning and starting Alpha again in the parish. I think that's a good thing, right? To run Alpha, and because it's one of those tools. I think we've done a bit of discovery with CCO, and I think that's a kind of a good thing too. But could there be a bit more? So I'm just going to respond to a couple of questions. So Jeff is here. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff always chimes in, and Angela and Amy. Amy's asking about a toothache. I mentioned this morning at Mass that my next stop was the dentist. Actually did an amazing job. So just a little shout out. I can't know if they'll say the actual. If you want to know who my dentist is, I'd be happy to share that with you, but I won't do that online. But Dad did get some good work, and I think we got that working. So Sophia, I think we need also to make active disciples with the uh, is it Christian schools and catechesis. Oh, with the children, yeah, schools and catechesis. Yeah, I think so too. This is something we're doing. Like I mentioned, VBS, Vacation Bible School, we're doing, and the way we do it, I think they're doing this thing called Stella, and it's about space, right? So it's kids love space, and backpacks, and the props are just amazing. So it's kind of like for kids, it's like a little mini Disneyland kind of thing with a solid message. Like it's not like you do a really cool thing and then kind of work Jesus in. No, Jesus is the message. Then you wrap around it a wrapper which is attractive. So yeah, that's things that we're doing. I kind of agree. We're doing things with our youth programming. We're trying to do kind of work with a little bit with CCO and with Net. These are all kind of things that we do. The younger they start, the better. Yeah, at my age, it feels more difficult. Yeah, it's true. Oh, I see what you mean. Like getting the whole idea of discipling. Yeah, I think that's true. It's funny. What I'm seeing is I think particularly I'd give a little shout out to younger clergy. Like I'm on the older side of clergy now. I don't always feel like that, but I think I truly am. And a little bit more boldness. I see it with some of our younger priests with companions. They're not shy about putting the word out there. My style was probably a little bit more passive. So maybe that is a thing of the youth. And it's going to take something like that. So this whole kind of changing of the culture, where having spiritual conversations is not so unique. Now, again, people may not want to talk about faith. That's fine. You got to respect that. But I think to not be afraid to bring it up, to wear a cross, in such a way is to start conversations, so spiritual conversations, not to be afraid to do these things. I think it's going to be part of what's going to be the hallmark of this next church. Like what got us here, this is a line too that I picked up, is probably not going to get us there. What I mean by that is how we've done things in the past, to simply say, well, we'll just kind of keep motoring on and hopefully things will get better in the future. I don't think we can say that anymore. I think it's okay, without, it's not criticism. However we got here, we got here. How do we get out of here is probably something a little bit more creative and a little bit more kind of, I say reactive is the wrong word, but intuitive. Like, okay, if that's not working, then let's try this. Let's not be afraid to try something else. Stellar and VBS are great, but what about the Catholic audience in the Catholic schools? Well, yeah, I mean, we do work with that. And we try to. Father Gerard is my counterpart at the Chancery, and we are connected to our school systems, and we're trying. That can be complicated, right? The relationship is not as clear as it used to be, but again, these are opportunities to continue to be in the game and see if we can't make a difference. So I agree, we can't be passive anymore. I think, yeah, it's going to be a trick, right? Now, you don't kind of change everything all at once, or should feel it just because this is the way you've gone to church for the last 50 years, suddenly you have to be in a different planet. No, but I think starting to make those changes, starting to talk about it, just like I am tonight, just putting that idea out there. How many people will watch this? Probably 40, 50 maybe. Okay, let's see. Make a comment down below. Like Sophia's made some nice comments. So is anyone else willing to comment on her comments and just get the kind of conversation started? Not so much in problem solving, I think, at this point, but it's just an acknowledgement of trying to define what it is to have a capacity for discipleship. That's an interesting question. And then how would we measure that? How do we encourage it? How do we build it up? What does it look like? Because once we start to do those things, I think that's when we start seeing change. And that's what we need to do. If we keep doing what we're doing, we know what we're going to get, pretty much what we're getting. So what do we do that's different? And not just kind of in reaction to what the world's doing, but I think in almost, say contradiction is a little different word, but it's not confronting, but I think it's contradiction almost would be a funny word. Like, again, this sort of notion that this liberal democracy is just going to continue to flourish. There will be enough for everyone, and somehow it's all going to be a Star Trek episode. I don't think it is. And it's not because the church is going to stop it. That's because I think it was a utopian ideal that never really had that much merit. It might have been a nice intention, but I don't know if it ever had legs. And so let's have an honest look at what's going on in our world and then try to be a credible alternative to it that draws people into faith and gives them new life. Maybe that's a good place to end. So thank you. I thank you for watching. I thank you for being the people that you are. I know these things are kind of complicated. They're not simple solutions. I never claimed to have all those. If I did, I'd be a popular guy. But I think it's a beginning of changing a culture and starting to think differently. And when we think differently, we become something different. And I think that's good news. May the good Lord watch over, guide, and protect you. May the saints and angels intercede for you. And our Blessed Mother wrap you in the mantle of her peace. May God bless you now, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.